today, so some of you, I think, have joined sessions already this year. We've been diving into different parts of insight from the Growth Culture Insights report that we brought out at the start of this year. And for those who haven't had a chance to look at it yet, that's essentially taking a look at top 20, they're actually UK-based organisations, but the reviews that we've accessed are in most of those cases more global. Glassdoor top rated organisations in 2025. So a mixture of types of organisations within that, and you can see it on the Glassdoor website. But essentially what we do is look at the qualitative comments. What are people saying about how it feels to work here? What are the good things? What are the things that get in the way of connecting and getting stuff done? And then we've mapped it to our models at Make It Human, just to try and bring more of a structured view of actually what are the patterns and trends here, and what can we do with that? So there is a broader report that you can dive into and have a look. The last session we looked at something, we looked at the first archetype that was emerging most frequently, most commonly. That was called kindly stretched. And today we're going to have a look at the second archetype, which is called permission-based, or I've just called it permission-based, just based on kind of the themes, the trends that are emerging. So what I will do is I will walk us through what that archetype is looking like, and hopefully you can see that reasonably okay on the screen. And then as I'm talking it through, have a think about whether you feel this is something. Are you seeing signs of this maybe in your organisation, or maybe you have previously in other organisations, and are these signs ringing true, or are there other things that you see? And also it'd be great to have a think about some of the habits and actions that might help us, if this is the archetype that we're facing, that might help us step towards growth. What are the things that we could change? What are the things that we could focus on that could help us nudge this type of culture towards a more healthy, balanced, growing culture? So permission-based. So as I said, this is the second most common culture archetype that we've seen emerging in the data. And really what I'm doing there is looking at the pattern. So if you look in the top left, you can see, for those who've come to sessions like this before, you've heard me talk about the 5 elements in growth cultures. And you can see here plotted kind of broadly that pattern that emerges. So the permission-based culture is one that has some real strengths. So real strengths around accountability, really outlining what good looks like, a real strong sense of community. So people feel we're in this together. You know, they're good at dividing work and working out who does what. They've got reasonable strengths in terms of providing a good workplace and flexibility when it's needed, potentially some room for improvement there, and growth as well, pretty average in terms of everyday learning opportunities and broader growth in terms of career development. But the big gap in this archetype is around empowerment. So, you know, really getting out of the way and letting people who are closest to the work make decisions, move things along. And that's really where this kind of phrase permission-based is coming in, because what this looks like, if you kind of were a fly on the wall, or even an alien landing and having a look at what does this organization look like, how do they get stuff done, it would look very well organized, very professional. You know, this is a place where people are quite measured, they're quite calm, quite controlled, everyone's respectful and considerate, and leaders seem very capable as well. You know, there's a lot of conversation at a surface level, and you know, work seems to be getting done. It seems busy, but it seems productive and ordered. That's kind of what it is looking like from the outside. But because of this profile, because of this dip around empowerment, where we start to see some signs of strain coming into an archetype or a culture with this type of archetype, is that most decisions are being made by managers and leaders. So you will very likely hear oh, I'll have to escalate that. I'll have to ask someone else. I'll have to seek permission to move that along, to make a decision. And that very much becomes the default because that's the process that's been put in place. You know, that's how work gets done. You need sign off, you need approval. And the strain can set in there because then you get a lot of middle managers who feel very overloaded because all roads lead to them. They have to have eyes on everything. They've got to sign everything off. And it can mean that work and progress starts to slow down a bit because it gets stuck in these layers. And also for people, you might start to hear things like, well, you know, there's no point in me sharing that. There's no point in me trying to do this or sharing that idea because there's a process and I need to respect the process and you know follow the steps that are put in place. And that can mean things like taking initiative, showing curiosity, and innovation starts to get dampened when if this carries on, if you know if this becomes the norm. And I should have said actually that we did tend to see this in organizations where there's a lot of regulation. So there's a lot of rules, there's maybe outside bodies that need to be satisfied in how stuff's getting done. So there were some financial sector organizations in this group where this was a culture type that was emerging. But some other ones too, so like service-based organizations as well, where it is very hierarchical in design and very client focused, and also some more public sector focused organizations in energy, where actually this was a trend that was emerging. So I'm now kind of moving over to the right hand side and starting to dive into a bit more some of the risks. So what are the things that could be blocking growth here, and what are some of the early signs that often don't get detected? So when we looked at one of our other models, culture cracks, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, those sort of early signs that there could be some toxicity starting to simmer here. The ones that were standing out, perhaps unsurprisingly, is something called parent-child, because you know people are basically develop a level of dependency because they are deferring everything up. They are relying on the parent or the manager in that relationship, and it can create this unhealthy dynamic. Also, we saw some emergence of culture clouds, and this was in particular around when it is a very hierarchically focused organization, you can get some moments where that power gets taken advantage of. So examples of that starting to kind of head in an unhealthy direction. So people, you know, feeling that they have to do things like this because otherwise there's going to be a consequence. So some of that toxic behavior starting to creep in some instances. And interestingly as well, overwork was still common in terms of people saying, I'm so busy. And often I would guess, I don't know for sure, but I would guess that a lot of this is more in relation to people in management roles, because that's where this work is piling up and they are constantly chasing their tails, trying to keep ahead of, you know, what do I need to approve? What do I need to look at next to keep this moving along? So some of the early signs there, as I've said, you know, they're going to be things like people seeking permission. If you were walking into this as a first day, you know, from the outside, you might be surprised by the level of, oh, I can't make that decision. I need to go and ask someone else. That might be quite a bit of a shock, if you particularly if you've come from a different type of industry and organizations. Middle managers being overloaded, and talented people often feeling, you know, I don't actually want to take on a management role because I see what happens to managers. You know, I don't necessarily continue using my skill. Actually, what happens is I start to get overloaded and overwhelmed. Is that what I want to do? And then, of course, what you start to get is people who like the hierarchy, who like the power, the opportunity that that gives, rather than the skills in coaching and people development who naturally move into those sorts of roles. So you can see where this, you know, left alone could start to create some broader issues. And some of those I've listed over on the outside, on the right hand side sort of further across around slower decision making, overloaded middle managers, declining initiative and learning, frustration and disengagement, because there's a lot of this kind of professional facade and everything's fine, everything's working, it's all very orderly, but actually I'm feeling frustrated because I can't move things along. I haven't got autonomy or influence or agency here. And that over time really can bubble away and cause some frustration. So, on the surface, there's a lot that is working well here in this organization. They are doing some things really well around creating a clear sense of accountability, and bringing people together around a strong sense of community. So, I don't think we should overlook those because they are hard to do. They're not the easiest things to build. But there definitely are some things that if you are sitting there thinking, I am in this permission-based type culture, there are some things that are going to create a drag if we don't act on them. So, in particular, around autonomy, decision ownership, getting decisions to the people who are doing the work, and I think ways to do that are focusing on some of the decisions that keep coming up and keep getting repeated. Are there some low-hanging fruit there that could be moved to people who are doing this day to day that, will feel comfortable because it doesn't have too much of an impact, but means that we're starting to empower, we're starting to step towards creating that ownership. And I think there's another big area to focus on here, which is the role of managers. If you've got managers who are focused on approving, on signing off, then they're not really creating the strength in relationship, connection, coaching, developing that actually would really help this culture, help these organizations move more towards a holistic growth culture. So those are some of the things that I see initially, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too. So that's kind of a high level look at this permission-based culture. And as I said, it was the second most frequently occurring archetype that we saw in the data set. A lot of highly regulated in organizations appearing here, but others as well. So it is a trend that we're seeing. And when the world of work, the world in general, feels ambiguous and complex, then trying to control things is a reaction. It's a knee-jerk response. So you can see how easily people get into these sorts of scenarios, and sometimes we just need to find ways to release some of that control and in a comfortable and gentle way move things more towards feeling empowered and feeling enabled.